Rock, paper, scissors. See who goes first. All right. Thank you all for coming out here tonight. We've got a really good crowd here tonight to see Alan Wilson, our Attorney General, speak to us. My name is Clay Counts. I'm the chairman of the Pickens County Republican Club here. And again, want to thank you all for taking your time to come here and be involved with the political process. A few housekeeping points. The restrooms are there in the back to the right side. There's a water fountain back there as well if you need to use those. Ground rules, we really only have one rule here is be respectful and be civil. We are in a church, so obviously, language, things of that nature. We'd rather you not use foul language, things like that, to respect those that are going to be watching online as well. One thing I always like to do is recognize our elected officials and candidates for office here that have come out. I know we've got quite a number here, so if I miss somebody, you guys call me out and point me down. Start on this side. We got Justin Durham for County Council, Tommy Blankenship for Sheriff. We got, I saw on that side, Chuck James as well for Sheriff. Damon Hubbard for Sheriff as well. Carla Kelly, School Board. Jerry Carter, Representative for State House District 3. And let's see, I'm missing somebody. I thought I saw somebody else. That should be all she wrote. So we've got a great crowd. Thank you for these people coming out. And for those of you that live in these people's districts, take a moment to speak to them. They're really interested in serving in these roles. They're not, somebody from Washington that's just trying to make a buck. These are people that want to make our communities better. So certainly reach out to these people, see what they believe in and why they should earn your vote. I'm going to hand it off now to our Vice Chairman, Rick Tate, for the next part of our program.
There was one other. Pam Anthony for State House District 10. Thank you for coming. Since we are in a church and we're these meetings, we'll try to keep them informal and friendly, like going to dinner at somebody's house and be friendly. But I don't know about your family, but my family, when anybody's in trouble, we ask for prayer. And if you meet Alan and get to know him, you will find one of the first things you'll find out about him is he is a dedicated family man. He is very dedicated to his wife and children, as well as his father-in-law, I'm sure, who is in ICU at the moment. And I believe he said you were trying to wean him off of a respirator tonight. So I'm sure Alan and his family would appreciate all of our prayers. You certainly have mine. And thank you for showing up here for us under the circumstances. You're more than welcome. So with that said, the South Carolina Republican Party creed, I think, is worth mentioning at all of these meetings, all of our Republican meetings, because it is a short version of our shared values. I do not choose to be a common man. It is my right to be uncommon. If I can seek opportunity, not security, I want to take the calculated risk to dream and build, to fail and to succeed. I refuse to barter incentive for dole. I prefer the challenges of life to the guaranteed security, the thrill of fulfillment, to the stale calm of utopia. I will not trade freedom for beneficence, nor my dignity for a handout. I will never cower before any master, save my God. It is my heritage to stand erect, proud, and unafraid, to think and act for myself, enjoy the benefit of my creations, to face the whole world boldly and say, I am a free American. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Clay.
Thank you, Rick. If you'll join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A couple of more real quick things. We have a sign-up sheet on the front over there. If you guys would please sign up, give me your email, and I'll email you 5 times a day. No more, no less. No, I'm just kidding. I'll email you a couple times a month. We have events like this all the time, candidate forums, things of that nature. Love to have you guys come out to more of those when you're able. We also have a small collection basket as well, if you guys are willing to offer a donation. The church offers this space to us for no charge, but we like to give them something as a token of our gratitude. So any amount is greatly appreciated, and it'll go straight to the church who can continue spreading the word of Jesus. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight. This is a special guest we have, Attorney General Alan Wilson. Mr. Wilson has been our Attorney General since, I think, in 2010, started in 2011, if I remember correctly. Long-time member of we'll call the South Carolina political group. Father is a congressman and has been really a strong representative of conservative values in Columbia. So it's my honor to hand it off to Attorney General Alan Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, there we go. I'm going to move around. Is that okay? All right, first off, it's great to be with all of you. Thank you so much for having me here. I love this community. I always, this is one of my higher counties that I get votes from every 4 years, so I want to say thank you. One of the reasons I come up here to events like this is because I view an elected official, and there's a number of candidates in here, I'm sure they share my position, is that the positions that we hold, they do not belong to us. They belong to you. The office of the Attorney General belongs to all of you. I'm a trustee of it, that I have been elected in trust to hold this office for you, the people, until such time as, either you don't want me there anymore or I decide to move on. And I'll say this, the reason I come up here to do these types of things, I view this kind of like I'm reporting back to my boss. You're all my boss. So that's why I'm here tonight to talk to you about it. I'm here to talk about a number of things. Obviously, and I know Val is over here talking about the Murdaugh trial, and during the Q&A, I've been talking about the Murdaugh trial for way too long. But if anybody has questions about it, I'm happy to answer questions about some of the high-profile cases that our office has been involved with. And also, I want to say something. I know there's a number of candidates here. I was about to say, you should have just said, Clay, raise your hand if you're not running for sheriff. I do want to say this about the sheriffs, and there's several candidates in here, and I want to thank you for offering your names up for the position. And there's only one sheriff, and there's more than one candidate. So what I want to say about this, when I was running for Attorney General, I remember when I ran in 2009 and 10, the first thing I did is I went to all 46 counties and met with every single sheriff, including the ones in the other party. What I found out was there were a lot of sheriffs who were in the other party, not because they agreed with the other party, but because they wanted to be a sheriff and protect their citizens, and they couldn't get elected otherwise. And of course, there were some on our side of the aisle who probably weren't Republicans, but ran as such. But the point I want to make is that it's the one job that everyone understands. Most people can't tell you what the Attorney General does. People think they know what the governor does. Members of Congress, the Senate, solicitors, what's the solicitor? They solicit, but the sheriff, that is the one person who's the tip of the spear, the highest elected law enforcement official in a county. And so it is one of the most important constitutional officers there are. And so you guys are about to elect a new sheriff this cycle. And for those who've offered your name up for that position, thank you. I think public safety is the foundational role of government. Government has grown and evolved over the last several centuries beyond what it was ever intended by the founders. And Rick, where did Rick sit? In the very back. I've probably done this analogy, killed this analogy, but how many people here have never heard me speak? Okay, how many have heard me speak? Okay, I'm probably going to say an old joke that you've all laughed at before or heard, but I'm going to do it again anyway. Governor McMaster gets away with the same joke every speech, right? So I'm going to do the same. Okay, so when I was growing up, and what I'm about to tell you illustrates my view of government. So when I was growing up, my dad used to make me watch, and my brothers, we watched cheesy horror movies from the 1950s. You know where I'm going with this? You've heard me say this before. There was a movie in the 1950s called The Blob. Who here's heard me give the Blob speech before? You've heard it. I haven't done this in over a year, so that's why I'm doing it tonight. So when I think about the role of government, I go back to this movie. So in the movie, it starred, I forget the actor. He was the Brad Pitt of the 1950s. What was his name? Tip of my tongue. Anyway, I'll remember his name in a minute. The movie takes place in like a small rural community. In the beginning of this movie, a meteorite lands from outer space in a field, and a homeless man happens upon it. The meteorite cracks open, and this little ball of goo oozes out, and he picks it up with a stick. and that little ball of goo runs down the stick, jumps on his hand, and it's cheesy 1950s special effects. It's claymation. It's way before CGI, and it kind of eats him up. And now this little thing that was the size of an egg is now the size of a cantaloupe, and it starts to roll through the town. And for the next hour and a half, it is consuming and eating everyone in its path. And as it eats people, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And of course, throughout the course of the movie, they're trying to stop the blob. They're trying to, they try to burn it up. They try to blow it up. They try to shoot it, stab it. Like nothing stops the blob except it hates the cold. And so at the very end of the movie, the main character, the main actor in the movie, his name is going to come to Steve McQueen. Thank you. My goodness. Thank you, Rick. I knew. Phone a friend. All right. Steve McQueen, okay? Nobody under the age of 40 knows who Steve McQueen was, but he was the star of the movie. He and his girlfriend and a few survivors are stuck in the diner, and the blob is busting in. And if you remember, now the blob is the size of the diner. It's like literally over the entire diner. So it's gone from this big to the size of a house. And they are using coolant extinguishers to keep it from breaking in long enough for the military to show up. And they were able to get the snow blowers, and they're able to freeze the blob. And the movie ends, spoiler alert for those of you who don't want to watch this movie, the blob is being carried out with a crane and net over the Arctic Ocean to be dropped into the Arctic Ocean. And it says, "The End," in a big blobby font with a question mark. And that's how the movie ends. So that's the cheesy horror movie. Okay, so when I'm thinking about the role of the federal government under our system of federalism, it was like the blob. At the beginning of the founding of our nation, the beginning of the movie, it's the size of an egg, right? And along the way, it started consuming. Instead of eating people, it ate liberty. And it started to grow and roll throughout time, through decades and through centuries. And then all of a sudden, it rolling into the 20th century, it rolled into the administrative state. And the power and the role of the branches of government were expanded far beyond. And like the blob, the federal government is never going to reach a point of satiety. It will never reach a point in which it has had enough, where it says, "I'm full." The blob's going to eat and eat and eat. There's no point in which it says, "I'm full, I'm fat, I'm good, I'm going home." The government's the same as the blob. There is no to what end. It will continue to devour and to continue to consume. I see my role kind of as the Steve McQueen character. My job is to try to protect people from the blob by doing everything that I can do to freeze, like the metaphors, freeze its growth, using the court systems when I can, using the Constitution when I can, advocating for people in elections who will help confine themselves in their respective roles and not try to grow their power, and to hold them accountable when they do. And so that is the federal, to me, the federal government and Congress is the blob. Now, I would love to be able to take Congress and the federal government out to the Arctic Ocean and drop them in there, but I don't have that ability, but we do use the court system. And so when you look at my tenure as AG, when I was elected in 2010 and took office in 2011, I was 37 years old, youngest attorney general in the country. 13 years and change later, I am now 50. I am the longest serving attorney general in the country. Still number 5 youngest out of 54 AGs, including states and territories. I'm very proud of that, by the way. That's my humble brag. Moving back to my speech. But during that time, I look at the role of the government. And during the Obama administration, I was involved in 30 lawsuits. I overlapped Mr. Obama's administration by 6 years. Okay, we're in year 3 of the Biden administration, and I have been involved in over 70 legal actions against the Biden administration to try to do the very thing that Steve McQueen did, is to confine the growth of government. This is a person who claims that Donald Trump, or any Republican who would want to be president, is a danger to democracy, that that they are a threat to democracy. But this is the same president who tried to marshal the power of the federal government to mandate 80 million Americans get a vaccine against their will through the OSHA mandates. We were one of the states that led in that effort, 22 states, and a bunch of private companies sued to stop them, and we won. We took that to the Supreme Court. This is the same president who basically picks and chooses what laws he wants to enforce, which laws he doesn't want to enforce based on what his personal preferences are. For instance, let's talk about immigration for a second, okay? This administration's been gaslighting the American people, and I'll tell you why. This is administration. Remember when they said, we need Congress to pass this federal immigration, this bipartisan immigration law so that I can have the power to do, to secure the border. Well, first, The bill has nothing to do with securing the border. It has everything to do with processing people being released into the interior. That's number one. Number two, this is a person who doesn't think he needs to have Congress's permission. He can go ahead and forgive billions of dollars in student loan debt with the stroke of a pen. This is a president who can unilaterally, through executive fiat, open the borders by removing Trump-era policies that required people to remain in Mexico. I mean, this is a president, as I just said, who can take OSHA and other federal agencies and mandate people get vaccines against their will. He doesn't seem to need Congress for those things, but he needs Congress for this. And I'd also remind people that during the Biden administration, he had the House and the Senate for 2 entire years of his first 2 years of his term, never bothered to want to try to pass an immigration law then. So everything that they said falls on deaf ears. And then when you, on top of opening up the borders, we've all seen the National Guard getting overrun in the last week, right? We're seeing this happen. Why is it that they want to lower the barrier to entry, but they also want to count these people in the census? Think about that for a second. It's really disgusting what they're trying to do. And that is something that I'm very much offended by. Now, 2 years ago, a young man from Venezuela crossed the southern border. Okay, just like those people overrunning the National Guard. He was captured, he was detained, he was processed, and he was released into the interior. So committed a crime by crossing illegally, processed, detained, released into the interior. Goes to New York, commits another crime, the endangerment of a child. He is detained, arrested, detained, processed, and released after the second crime. A year later, in October of 2023, he comes to Georgia, where he's busted and arrested for shoplifting, where he's detained, processed, and released. Third crime, released a third time, refuses to show up for his court date in December. Warrant for his arrest is issued. 2 months later, a young woman named Laken Riley is going jogging in Athens, Georgia, and is allegedly, I got to say that for legal reasons, is allegedly brutally murdered by this guy. Okay, Laken Riley would be alive today, I believe, if the Trump remain in Mexico policy were in place. But even if that was lifted, had this individual been detained and not released after crossing the border, she'd be alive. They had a second chance in New York and a third chance in Georgia. And 3 chances, the system failed her. That's why last month they were passing the Laken Riley Act. The Laken Riley Act would have made it basically, it would have made it a requirement for any federal ICE agent or immigration authority, when they get an illegal alien, I'm going to say illegal alien, okay? They get an illegal alien who has committed a theft offense, like a shoplifting, an armed robbery, any kind of offense, violent or not, the theft, they are required to be detained, and it gives the state attorney general the authority to file an injunctive action against someone refusing to do their job. It passed the House, it went to the Senate, where I think it will die. But we sent a letter, I got 20, come here, you drop a baby, anchors you to the country. This is the reverse of that. This is the anchor parent. You're coming from Central or South America, it gets the parent, once the parent is here illegally, they can bring their child up. So it's the reverse of an anchor baby. We sued to try to get that overthrown. Right now, I'm joined in a lawsuit. My good friend Ken Paxton, who is the Attorney General, my other good friend Greg Abbott, the governor, who I served with for a few years when he was Attorney General, the state of Texas passed a law called SB 4. And before I tell you about what y'all following what SB 4 is in Texas? I think y'all are all read up on it. If you go back about 12, 13 years ago when President Obama was in office, there was a lawsuit against the state of Arizona. It's called US v. Arizona. Arizona passed some immigration laws, and this is what's basically going on. The federal government has passed laws that say it's illegal, it's a federal crime for someone to illegally cross the border without permission and to remain here. That is a crime. You are a criminal, and then you are to be deported when that happens. That is a federal mandate under federal law. During the Obama administration, the federal government was doing kind of what they're doing now. They weren't enforcing that criminal provision. And so Arizona passed similar provisions saying, okay, we're going to pass laws that give our state authorities the ability to deport people when they enter illegally. The Obama Justice Department sued Arizona to stop them under this theory of preemption. Y'all know what preemption is. I know, Val, you probably studied preemption in law school. You're already there. Basically, it's an idea under the Supremacy Clause, Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution. It says, obviously, the Constitution, federal law, trump, no pun intended, trump state law. And I actually support that. There has to be a hierarchy. However, Under our system of federalism, and I remind our friends on the left that the federal government didn't create the states. The states created the federal government, right? Okay? And that cooperative federalism says that we can pass laws that duplicate each other and complement each other. So, federal government, you're saying you're going to occupy this area of immigration policy. Well, we should be able to do it as well. The federal government's saying, no, you can't do it. Once we occupy it, you can't do anything with it. But we're saying, but you're not enforcing your own laws. And there's also another clause in the Constitution called the Invasion Clause under Article 1 that allows states to defend themselves from an invasion, which this is. So fast forward. Here we are, again, similar situation. State of Texas is trying to make it a state crime, complementary of the federal crime, to enter Texas illegally from Mexico. And if you are caught, you are sent back to Mexico. Does that seem controversial? Biden administration, Justice Department suing, saying the same thing the Obamas did. You can't enforce laws because we are occupying the area of immigration. Well, my retort to that is, hey, it's currently a federal crime to traffic drugs in South Carolina. It's also a state crime to traffic drugs in South Carolina. The whole point of these laws is two sovereigns can pass laws that complement each other and support. And it would be one thing if Texas wanted to pass a law that contradicted federal law. That's different. That's supremacy clause, right? Preemption. This means the state of Texas should be allowed to defend their borders because the federal government won't. And what's happening right now is the federal government's coming in, occupying an area, and then saying we're not going to enforce it, but we're not going to let you do it either. So we led a 22-state coalition in an amicus brief to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals right now. We're trying to get this back to the United States Supreme Court to overturn the U.S. v. Arizona. That is another area where we've been really fighting hard to basically constrain or freeze the growth of the federal government because it is not only getting larger and occupying areas it shouldn't, it's the areas that it is supposed to occupy, it's not doing its job. And it's trying to keep us from doing it for them. And that's not the way the founders envisioned how this country was supposed to be founded on. Now, I've talked about, I'm jumping all over the place, but I want to give you kind of a couple of updates on some of the things that we've been involved with. Now I want to talk to you about a local issue, a state issue. How many of you have been following the debate on judicial reform? I know our representative back here is all over it like a fat kid on a cupcake, right? Not that you're a fat kid. Okay. Like white on a snowflake, right? There we go. Judicial reform is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I want to talk to you about why you should care about it as much as I do. There are two states in the United States of America that elect judges the way that South Carolina does. Us and Virginia. Okay? There are states that do it worse than we do. I'm against popular election of judges. And I'm happy, for those of you who want popular elections, I'm happy to talk to you and answer your questions why I'm against it. But I prefer the federal model, but unlike the federal model, it's very different. Full-time U.S. senators don't practice law in front of the judges that they are in front of, and these judges also go up for life appointments, okay? So it's a little bit different. Here in South Carolina, I would love it for the governor to be able to make an appointment, but under our state constitution, and this is how our laws are set up. Under the state constitution, it says, this is how we elect judges. There has to be a thing called the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. Judicial Merit Selection Commission. It is supposed to be the vetting vehicle that we vet all the candidates for judicial office, and then they give nominations to the General Assembly to vote on. The Constitution says we have to have it, but it is silent as to who sits on the JMSC, what the qualifications are for judges, what the terms for JMSC commission members are, how the staff is paid, where it's housed. All of that is done by statute. So to get rid of the JMSC and go to a federal model, if you could even do that, would require a constitutional amendment. But there is a way to do real reform without having to open up the hood of the Constitution. And before I tell you what my prescription for these solutions would be, I want to tell you why it's important. There are three branches of government. At the federal level, our founders, Madison, and if you go back and read the Federalist Papers, they wanted the ambition of individuals in each branch of government to be checked by the ambitions of other members of the other branches of government, right? They didn't want siloed power. They wanted divided power because they came from England where the king had the ability to pass a law, to enforce a law, and to adjudicate that law. And they wanted to separate that because they wanted, and again, y'all have all heard the Madisonian quote, if all men were angels, right? Well, we're not all angels. Okay, so we got to come up with a system that can check our own ambitions against each other, which is why I like the tension of the three branches of government. In South Carolina, the way we do it is the JMSC has 10 members on it, 5 appointed by the Speaker of the House, 3 by the Judiciary Chairman of the Senate, 2 by the Pro Tem of the Senate. So 3 members of the leadership get to elect all 10 members of the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. Okay? Of those 10 members of the Judicial Merit Selection Commission, 6 are actually sitting legislators. Think about that. 6 are sitting members of the General Assembly. The other 4 are also appointed by those 3 members of the General Assembly. So if there's a vacancy on the court, it could be family court, circuit court, court of appeals, Supreme Court. Those candidates would then apply to the JMSC, the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. The JMSC would then evaluate those, and let's say there's 10 people who apply to be a judge. I don't know how many would apply on any given day, but let's say 10 apply. The law requires that they nominate 3 of the most qualified. I say their 3 favorite candidates, get vetted out to the General Assembly, and then the legislature at large votes for all the judges. But what's happening, and here's the thing, what's happening is a group of 10 people, a super commission that's dominated by the legislature, gets to choke out all the candidates that they perceive that they don't want. Now, they may actually come to the right 3 candidates, and I'm not here to attack the credibility or the integrity of members who serve on it, but I'm saying it's the perception by the public that if you have 10 qualified people, but you get to get rid of 7 right off the bat who never even get to be considered, that's a lot of power to give a small group of people. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's in the legislature who's very skeptical of my position, and they're a little bit more, they want to keep the status quo. And we've had back and forth conversations, but they're like, Alan, the legislature is closest to the people, and you want to give more power to the governor in the selection of these judicial candidates. This is what I said to my friend. I said, you're right. Your House member who's here tonight is closer to you than either me or the governor, because we're not even here. I live in Lexington. The governor lives in Columbia, right? But here's the catch. This is clever what they did. And remember, our Constitution was written in 1895 by Pitchfork Ben Tillman. What was going on right then and there? Reconstruction. A little distrust because you had almost military rule in South Carolina. They did not want a strong executive. They wanted that power retained by the legislature. And so that's how the Constitution was written, and then that has been the culture for the last 130 years, that we have a diluted executive branch and an all-powerful legislative branch. I do want the legislature to be powerful. I just want the executive branch to be equally powerful along with the judicial branch. They need to create equal tensions between the 3 branches. And so this is my point. You all get to vote for and against your 1 senator and your 1 House member. So if you don't like the quality of the judges statewide, and by the way, they travel. The judges from Charleston travel up here, right? And yours travel down there. They're on a circuit. That's why I call them circuit judges, right? You get to vote for or against your 1 House member, your 1 senator, right? So what they've done is if you don't like the quality of the judges, the system has consolidated power in 1 branch of government while dispersing accountability. The reason I want the governor to have a seat at the table, everyone gets to vote for and against the governor. And if you don't like the quality of the judges you're getting, if you think that they're too liberal, if you think that there are not enough women, if you think there are not enough minorities, they're not pro-victim enough, they're not pro-law enforcement or too anti-whatever, they're not pro-business, then the whole state can go to the governor and put pressure on the governor, and the governor has to consider globally the people of South Carolina. Now, I kind of skipped a step. What would the governor's role be? This is my prescription. I'm going to tell you what's currently going on in the legislature. How am I on time, Rick or Clay? Y'all keep me, I'm still, how long, when am I supposed to shut up? No, don't work that way. I need someone to come out with a hook and pull me for Q&A, because I know y'all have to get on to your lives, and I have to drive back to Lexington. Okay, so we started at 6:30, right? Okay, good. So this is my prescription. The JMSC, statutorily, we need to gut it. The JMSC, this is what I would recommend. It needs to go outside the legislature, so that the staff of the JMSC are no longer legislative staff. They are currently legislative staff. They go outside the legislature. A line of funding separate from the General Assembly funds them. General Assembly still has the budget, power of the purse. They should keep that. Then, so all the staff are now independent commission staff. The commission, we should remove the cap of 3. Right now, they only cap it at 3 candidates. So if you have 20 people apply, 10 people apply, whatever, they get to choke out all those candidates and no one else gets to be considered by a vote. And so the argument would be they could have their preferred candidate and 2 throwaway candidates, right? I'm not saying that's happening, but that's the perception sometimes. So that was remove the cap of 3 and then have term limits. In other words, when a judge comes up every 6 years or 8 years, depending on what court they're on, they're not appearing in front of the same commission. So you serve 2 2-year terms or 3 2-year terms, and you have it staggered so that people are constantly rotating every 2 years off the JMSC. And when a judge comes back up, they're not sitting in front of the same people. I'd prefer no legislators to be on the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. I believe that the governor should make all the appointments to the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. Okay? I think the governor gets to make all the appointments, the chairman, they set the agenda, the executive branch controls the vetting and the nominating, and the legislature gets to completely dominate and control the election. And they share joint custody over the funding because the governor gets to veto budgets and whatnot. Is it perfect? No. But there's a lot more balance, and it gives you a voice at the executive branch of government while the legislature retaining power at the legislative level. Right now, there's a couple of bills from the House and the Senate. The House is actually debating a bill right now that was from the ad hoc committee. And let me say this, I don't go around attacking people, I attack systems. But I went to the Speaker of the House over a year ago. It was right before the Murdaugh trial. And I said, Mr. Speaker, this is a concern, and we talked about judicial reform. I've been talking about it for 10 years. But I felt this was the time to strike. He said, finish your trial, come back and talk to me in the spring. The trial ended, I came back and talked to him. He said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to appoint an ad hoc committee, and I'm going to put diverse opinions on there, and we're going to debate this thing, we're going to vet this thing. I said, fair enough. And they gave me the ability to come in and testify, and I did that. The Speaker kept his word. The Judiciary Chairman, and by the way, the Speaker is the lawyer legislator. Weston Newton, Judiciary Chairman, Tommy Pope, these are all lawyer legislators. What I'm telling you today is I'm not going to demonize lawyer legislators because a lot of the lawyer legislators are the ones that carried the water in the House. There are lawyer legislators in the Senate who did the same. By the way, there are Republicans who are very much in favor of judicial reform, but there are also Democrats who are very much in favor of judicial reform. They may have slightly different motivations, but they're for it. There are people in the Republican Party who want the status quo. There are people in the Democratic Party who want the status quo. What I'm saying is this isn't a blue and red issue. There are times for us to put on our red jerseys and go out there and fight for the conservative viewpoint. This is a good government issue. But the point is there are people who do not want to have power wrenched away from them. They want to maintain it, and for whatever reason. But what I'm here to say is I'm not going to demonize leadership of the legislature, because I've been working hand in glove with them in both the House and the Senate. So the House passed a bill, and the House's bill does a couple of things that I like. It removes the JMSC from out under the legislature, makes it an independently funded commission. It removes the cap of 3, and it term limits the members of the commission. It gives the House 4, the Senate 4, and the governor 5. The governor gets to have, one of the governor's 5 is a retired judge who shall be the chairman of the commission. I like that because the chairman of the commission sets the agenda and the times. I want the governor to have his hand on the wheel. It does allow the legislature to have at least 2 House members and 2 senators on there. I do not like that. However, if you remove the cap of 3 so that any candidates that are vetted as qualified get to go to a full vote, and you term limit people, I can live with it. I don't think it's the better plan, but I think it's the good enough plan. And let me explain why. The analogy I use, and I've used this when I testified at the ad hoc committee, I use the analogy of 2 women who walk into a store to get an orange. And they both reach in the basket, and there's only 1 orange left. And they both reach for the orange, and they get into an argument. I want the orange. No, I want the orange. But they end up negotiating a settlement. And what they agree to do is they agree to cut the orange in half and split the cost of the orange, right? And they both walk out paying half the price of the orange and getting half the orange. Good negotiation, right? Half and 50% of the cost. Sounds great. The next day they bump into each other and they have a conversation about the deal that they made the day before. And as they talk, they realized, wait a second, was that a good deal? One of the women learns from the others. She goes, one woman wanted nothing but the rind because she was making marmalade jelly, and she needed the orange zest. The other woman wanted nothing but the pulp because she was making a glass of orange juice for her sick husband. And had they talked about their interest in the orange, not their position on the orange, the position being they wanted the orange, their interest is they just one wanted the rind, one wanted the pulp. Had they had a conversation about their interest, they both could have gotten 100% of what they wanted at half the cost. But they didn't have that conversation. So when I went to the legislature, I said, my position is no longer legislators on the commission, because I don't think that's good. I think the governor should have all the appointments. But my interest is dilute the authority, bring balance and parity of power among the three branches, and bring more transparency. All the committees would now, all the judicial committees would be televised. So you'd get to see the judicial candidates being questioned on their views of jurisprudence and the law, right? And you don't have the JMSC controlling it anymore. And actually, I suggested to the Speaker and the members of the General Assembly, you can take this back if you want, they liked it. It shouldn't be called the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. It should be called the Judicial Merit Qualification Commission. Because all it's supposed to do is to determine whether you are qualified or not to be a candidate. It's not supposed to control the ultimate outcome, who is actually selected to be a judge. And they were like, that's not a bad idea. Rebrand it. It is a qualification commission now. So the Senate plan, much, much worse. You know, you think you have a really pretty baby, and then someone else delivers a baby, and you see, wow, that baby's much prettier than my baby. Well, the Senate was the ugly baby. But let me say this. The Senate passed the best bill that they can, because in the Senate, one senator can gunk up everything. And you have so many different, it's like herding cats over there. The House have a little bit more of a capability to bring together a compromise. They have a 4-4-4 plan. The JMSC stays up under the legislature, okay? The staff still works for the legislature. The four to the governor, 4 to the House, 4 to the Senate. The governor's 4 have to consider gender and race and all these things, but the General Assembly can appoint whoever they want, including legislators. So you could have the House appointing 4 House members, the Senate appointing 4 senators, and the governor appointing 4 lay people from outside the General Assembly. So you've gone from 6 out of 10 being legislators to 8 out of 12. My math is right. That's going from 60% to 67% legislators on the JMSC. That's going the opposite direction. So the Senate bill is more flawed than the House bill, in my opinion. But it is they got it passed out of the floor. If we can get the House bill out and the Senate bill out, we can take the best of both in conference, and we can do the interest thing that I talked about with the orange. We can meet our interests by bringing parity of power, more transparency, more accountability, more access to people who make decisions by you all, right? And so I want to give you one or two anecdotes on why I think this is important. I was talking to a chamber group a couple of months ago, and a woman came up to me. And the JMSC has a citizens advisory group, and they have a South Carolina Bar Advisory Group. These are volunteer groups. They're not controlling, but they get to look at all the candidates applying for a particular judgeship, and they get to weigh in. And a woman came up to me after I spoke to a chamber group, and she said, Mr. Wilson, she said, I want to tell you a story. And this is like in the last couple of years. She said, I serve on the Citizens Advisory Group, and we had a person come through the legislature who was running for a particular kind of judge. I don't want to say what judge. I don't want to identify who the person is. But she said this person was running for judge, but they had worked in state government their entire career. They had never practiced law in front of the very kind of judge, the very kind of court that they were wanting to be a judge over. No experience whatsoever. They've been a lawyer for a long time. They just hadn't practiced law in this particular kind of law. So the advisory committee wrote a note to the JMSC saying, we want, we don't think you're qualified. You should go and practice law for a few years, and we'd be happy to endorse your candidacy, but we find you unqualified. Not only was that judicial candidate found most qualified by the JMSC from all the other candidates, but was ultimately elected to the bench. Now, I'm not saying this person's not competent to learn the job. I'm not saying this person won't be a good judge, but knowing who this person is, this person made it through because of who they were and who they knew and their relationship. It wasn't merits-based. There were other candidates clearly more qualified. But that is an example of where I think the JMSC probably got it wrong. I'm not saying this person shouldn't have been qualified to run, but they certainly weren't the most qualified, having never practiced law. That's another example. One other anecdote I will share is I speak to people who travel the country doing economic development. And this person who I was talking to says when they go and speak to secretaries of commerce, commerce departments around the country, or excuse me, when they talk to people wanting to come build in South Carolina, they say that the commerce departments in other states use the way we elect judges against us for recruiting companies. Because they say if you walk into a courtroom This is what they tell the companies who are thinking about coming to South Carolina. And there's a lawyer legislator on the other side. You're screwed. That's the perception, and that's what they're saying. And I had someone say, he said, you can quote me and you can cite me. I'm not going to cite him, but I'll quote him. He said, they're using this to try to prevent people from recruiting. And one anecdote to illustrate that, I was talking to a CEO of a major, I don't want to say what Fortune company it was, but it was a high-level Fortune company, and you've heard the name. And this person, the CEO was telling me years ago, they used to do this safety training for in the type of industry that they're in, and they would do it for their employees. They're tens of thousands of employees. They were doing safety trainings for municipal governments that kind of occupied the same kind of, did the same kind of work that this company did. And they did it at cost to help these municipalities out. Well, 20 years ago, a person working for a municipality took this company's course on the safety accreditation course and got certified as a safety person for the municipality. And then like a dozen years later, this person gets horribly injured on a property, not the company's property that did the training. And this person was not an employee of the company. They were not on the company's property. The company had nothing to do with it. The company just did a free safety training course 10, 12 years earlier. This person gets horribly damaged, hires an attorney. They sue the property owner, the business owner, and then, of course, the company that did the training, because those are deep pockets. They show up at the trial. Now, this is what the CEO told me. This is what he described for me. I'm not telling you what happened, because I don't know, I wasn't there. I'm telling you what the CEO perceived. We're sitting there to do pretrial motions. The plaintiff's firm's on this side with the injured party. My company's over here with all our lawyers. We're about to go in. The judge hasn't gotten there yet. And a person who is in the General Assembly, is law partners with the plaintiff's firm, walks in, and this is what they overhear. How you doing? Good. Judge is in the parking lot. I'll go talk to the judge. All right, see you inside. They go out, talk to the judge. 20 minutes later, the judge takes the bench. And then they proceed to lose every single pretrial motion. Evidence they don't think should be in is allowed in. Evidence they should be kept out is allowed in, and vice versa. They're losing all their pretrial motions. They end up losing the case, and it costs them millions of dollars. The cost gets passed to the consumer of their goods and services, and the safety trainings stopped. Those municipalities now have to go pay for different safety trainings. They don't get it for free anymore, at cost. So the municipalities lost out, the company lost out, and now that CEO says, when I travel the country and people talk about South Carolina, so we love South Carolina, but, and he tells that story. Now, this is what he told to me. He said, Alan, I don't know what that lawyer legislator said to the judge. I don't even know if it had anything to do with our case. I don't know if that judge took what that lawyer legislator said to them and used that in the factoring in how to rule on our motions. We don't know. But I know how it made me feel. And what does that cost us in economic development, right? So those are anecdotal examples. I haven't even gone into the criminal stuff. I haven't gone into the victim stuff, because that would take a long time. But I'm here to tell you today is I think South Carolina would be more competitive as a state. We'd be a more pro-law enforcement state. And I think as far as better government goes, good government goes, and y'all have heard me say this before, those of you who've heard me speak, government should have 5 attributes. It should be responsible, predictable, accountable, profitable, and stable. Responsible, predictable, accountable, profitable, and stable. That fails almost every prong, especially the accountability prong. How do you hold one branch of government accountable when they are completely inoculated from the public because of the control by the other branch? And that's what I want to level off. Okay. All right. I am happy to use the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, for Q&A. I know I focused on a couple of things tonight, immigration and judicial reform, but I'm happy to address other issues. Remember, this is a church. Brotherly love, right? No, I'm kidding.
And make sure you use the microphones. We do
go.
capture that into the live stream audio.
And the video of this will be available at PickensCountyTownHall.com. You can find it there, or go on YouTube and just Google Pickens County Town Hall. So if anything you missed, you want to hear it again, or you want to share it with your friends, you can go there and find it.
And Rick, before you hand it off, at some point, I don't know if the representative wants to make any comments, because you were involved in that process. We can do it during Q&A, but I didn't. You were part of it, and I wanted to give you an opportunity. If you
and it's only fair, since you were pointed out a couple of times as a
well,
representative.
I was bragging on you.
Say something. You're welcome to go first. There you go. Stand up and introduce yourself.
I am Jerry Carter. I represent the third.
Judicial reform means a lot to me personally. To your question, and then we'll go to the gentleman in the back. So it's kind of like when you're training for the Olympics, and as you go along, you don't realize how out of shape you are, but as you train, you get in really good shape, and then you do really well, and then 4 years later, you train even more, and you get smarter, wiser, stronger, and then you do even better. So you're always grading on a point in time. You're never where you want to be, but you're better than you were. And so, sorry for the metaphor, but that's the best way I can explain it. So when the human trafficking, so when I ran for Attorney General the first time, there was no human trafficking task force. I lobbied for it in 2012 in my first term, and it was bipartisan. Everyone came on board, and South Carolina was rated one of the worst states in the country for enforcing human trafficking laws, for going after human traffickers. We had nothing on the books. I never used the words human trafficking when I ran the first time. And after meeting a victim and a survivor of human trafficking, I became passionate and empowered to go after this and went to the legislature. They gave us a great law, and we used that law to create the State Human Trafficking Task Force. We have now grown that task force from 15 members since 2013 to now over 900 members. We now have 11 regional task force, about to go up to 13 regional task force. Last year, I think, I'm going off of my recollection, but I think SLED had over 400 open investigations involving human trafficking. 98% of them were involved, no, 92% involved minors, 74% involved females. We have, I think we've had 281 human trafficking charges statewide since 2013. 61 of those were from the upstate. And if you look at the upstate, it sits nestled between Atlanta and Charlotte. What runs between those two? I-85. It is a corridor for human trafficking and drug trafficking. On the first week of January this year, we had a major drug trafficking bust, a major fentanyl bust, working with the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, the Pickens Sheriff's Office, the Greenville, and several municipal governments, as well as ICE, Department of Homeland Security, Department of Justice. We actually seized 1.5 kilos of methamphetamine and 1 kilo of fentanyl. We have identified 6 people who died as a result of fentanyl overdose related to this drug trafficking ring, and possibly up to 8 more who may have died. We're investigating that now. You're asking us what we're doing to go after the fentanyl trafficking, which is and you wanted me to talk about drug and human, so I'm talking about both trafficking. The fentanyl is pouring over the southern border. The Chinese government, in partnership with the Mexican drug cartels, are using the open borders, and they're pouring in everything. And it's coming up through the hub of Atlanta and coming into the upstate of South Carolina. We indicted 64 defendants in that case. 3 of them we indicted for murder. And while we don't have a fentanyl bill or fentanyl law on the books that allows us to go for 30 years, we decided, hey, if I point a gun at you and I pull the trigger, knowing that that bullet hits you, it could kill you, right? I should be charged with murder. What if I give you a pill knowing that it's laced with fentanyl and there's a likelihood you could die if you ingest it? To me, that's murder. So we say, hey, let's indict him for murder. We're going to go hardcore. We're pedal to the metal. And so we did that. We seized, and by the way, 1 kilogram of fentanyl goes for over $1 million on the street, and it's enough fentanyl to kill 500,000 citizens in our state. 500,000 people on 1 kilogram. And it's cheaper to produce, it's cheaper to move than heroin. That's why you're seeing heroin drop off and fentanyl's taken off. And I'm telling you right now, go home and have a conversation with your kids and your grandkids about pill parties, because kids are dying with this stuff. Back to your question. I went down a rabbit hole. I started preaching. I measure success based on where we were, not, right now we are far, far, far away. We didn't even know that human trafficking was a problem 13 years ago. In 2019, because of the work of the Human Trafficking Task Force, we made recommendations to the General Assembly, and that was the South Carolina was rated number 1 state in either 2019 or 2020. It was right before COVID hit. Number 1 state in the country on most improved in combating human trafficking, because of the work of the task force that the legislature gave me and our ability to give recommendations back on what laws to pass, as well as training judges, prosecutors, law enforcement officials, SANE nurses, medical professionals, educators, nonprofits on human trafficking. We're identifying it and we're attacking it better. So we are successful, but we are so far from where I want to be. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. On both fronts. All right. You've been very patient, sir. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Where does the state stand on dealing with squatters?
I was asked that. A lot of the drug trafficking and the gang activity, once someone's arrested for doing that, they go to prison, they continue to do it because there's a federal regulation. If you go back to the Federal Communications Act, it's an 80-year-old law, okay? Obviously, we didn't have the internet back then, but the way they apply the law now, it prohibits state prisons from being able to do cell phone jamming, okay? Federal prisons are allowed to go into the middle of the prison and put this little box in there, and it kind of just creates like a shield, like around it. And Brian Sterling, who used to work for me, Governor Haley appointed him to be the director of corrections. He's been a national leader on this. He's a great guy. You should talk to him if you ever or invite him up here to talk about this. But I'm leading with the Department of Corrections directors all over the country an effort, and I'm supporting this bipartisan. I've led bipartisan letters with AGs from all states who are very supportive of this on both sides of the aisle. We don't agree on a lot, but we agree on this, is that they need to change by adding 2 words, or states. Federal prisons or states. Because what happens is the people that make the technology will not sell it to the states because they're prohibited by federal law. And the federal government will not amend the law to allow state prisons to put that box there that creates like an iron dome. And it's very accurate. For instance, you could be on your cell phone on this side of the door, and I could be talking to you on a cell phone, and then I do this to the threshold of the door, and it shuts off. It's that accurate. But the telecommunications lobby up in D.C. is very concerned. They would argue that we're afraid that it might disrupt nearby coverage from people in homes and communities around prisons. And our point of view is that the Federal Bureau of Prisons is already doing it, and no one's complaining, and it's very accurate. It's a very known technology. And what's happening is, y'all heard years ago, the Lee correctional riots and inmates were killed as a result of this riots. Well, on one wing of the prison, you had I forget the gangs, which gang it was, but Gang A calls over to another Gang A member on another wing that they don't have contact with, and they say, Gang B just attacked our guy, go attack them. And then that started the riot. I'm oversimplifying, but that's basically what happened. If they're able to move drugs. The Las Señoritas, which is another grand jury case. There are people in prison working with women on the outside who are married to members of the Mexican drug cartel, and they're facilitating drug trafficking from behind prison in coordination with the cartels because they have cell phones, and cell phones go for 10 grand a pop in prison. They're very powerful tools to have. So we've been lobbying the federal government for at least 8 years to change the federal law under the Federal Communications Act to so the FCC will allow us to get that technology in state prisons. Now, in the interim, I was talking to Director Sterling not too long ago, and he told me they do have an intermediate type of technology, and I would view it as whack-a-mole. You know that little game that things pop up and you whack them down? Whenever someone in the prison activates their phone, there's a number assigned to that. Not the telephone number that you would dial, but it's like the serial number, and it pops up on a grid. They're able to call Verizon or AT&T or whatever and say, phone, ... just activating the prison, shut it down. And from last August till I think around January or February, they've confiscated or locked down over 800 phones in the prisons in South Carolina. But it's whack-a-mole. As opposed to having an iron dome that just stops everything dead, they have to make the call to get on the grid to get shut down. So it's helpful, and it's better than nothing. It would just be easier if we put that dome over, and it's a simple change in the law. And because it's so easy, we can't do it. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but absolutely. It's bad. It really is.
Anybody else? Introduce yourself.
me to use the law to stop bad government. So right now, the Congress could say, we want to raise taxes to 100%, and we want to be able to abort people until they're 15 years old, right? I mean, I'm being silly when I say that. But the point is that Congress can pass a bad law as a matter of bad policy, and the Constitution allows Congress to be bad at its job. And Congress doesn't need any help being bad at its job, but it certainly is allowed to be bad at its job. It's when they try to do something outside the authority granted to them by an enumerated power, okay? They have also tried to prevent the states from trying to exercise our state sovereignty. And as you know, under the 10th Amendment, because remember, as I said earlier, the states created the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states, and we passed the 10th Amendment in the Bill of Rights in 1791 because we wanted to retain to ourselves anything not prohibited by the state or specifically given to the federal government or prohibited by the Constitution to the states, we get to keep. That's where the general police power resides. Congress, the federal government doesn't have general police power, but they love to try to implement general police powers. That's why they did the OSHA mandate, right? We said, you can't do that. States can pass mandates like that. Now, that might be a bad policy. I'm not saying I'm endorsing it, but states have general police power. You don't, Congress. Quit trying to do that. So we're constantly suing them for violating constitutional precepts, constitutional tenets. However, there are things that they do that, for instance, we struggled with this. We actually found a way, but can Joe Biden unilaterally, with the stroke of his pen, forgive $10 billion or however many billion of dollars in student debt under the HEROES Act? No. And we were successful in that. He turned around and did it under another federal law, which is a little trickier, but we were able to work with private citizens to bring a suit, and we're trying to stop that. So we can stop illegal government with the courts if we have good rule of law judges, okay? We can't stop bad government with the court system, the judicial system, or the Constitution. We have to elect different people in government or get rid of them altogether. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
that was great. And then just as a follow-up to it, anything else you're working with other attorney generals?
all the time. And so a minute ago I talked about the 26th letter supporting the Lake and Riley Act, the 22. I led an amicus brief in support of Texas's SB 4. You go back to Dodd-Frank. You go back to the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. That was the first big one. We're 26 states. I mean, I am on multiple lawsuits with multiple states every single month against the Biden administration. I think right now, I don't usually ask to lead a lot of them because we're in the Fourth Circuit, which is based in Richmond, and the Fourth Circuit is probably almost, if not worse, than the Ninth Circuit now, and the Ninth Circuit is lost to us. And so I don't ever want to go up to the Fourth Circuit on appeal because it's a bad court. We have a couple of good judges, but they're all Obama appointees otherwise. So generally, I go over to Louisiana or Texas, and I'm like, hey, let's go in or Georgia and Florida in the 11th Circuit. You got the 5th Circuit. Missouri's in the 8th Circuit. These are much more conservative circuits. So I say, hey, listen, we'll help write the brief. You guys take it down and file it in your district court so we can use that circuit court. So we're always playing chess with the federal circuits, trying to find the best venue to bring our case. Sometimes we have to get a private plaintiff that we support because the states may not have standing. Oftentimes the plaintiffs come to us and say the states are the most powerful person to have standing in this case. And so we're always talking. I'm on the phone. I was on the phone with an attorney general earlier today. We're always talking about ways we can work together to roll back the federal government, to roll back the blob, as I talked about earlier.
Anybody else?
Right up here. Oh, we got one up here and one back there.
Okay.
This will be really quick. Okay, I'm Cassie.
Without the top of my head. I have 8,000 cases rattling around up here. But I can tell you is I'm seeing this happening with other agencies and other issues. And for instance, y'all have heard of WOTUS, Waters of the U.S., where they take a rule. Waters of the U.S., we all graduated third grade civics. Mississippi River, right? Great Lakes. right? Interstate commerce on the river systems. They want to be able to take an ephemeral drainage ditch on the dirt road going into your farm, or a small pond that is adjacent to a low-lying wetlands, which is adjacent to a river, and try to make that a water of the U.S. so that you now have to go get federal permitting from the EPA. Well, our brief, we sued on that. That's where they're trying to expand the role of it's just different issue, but the same premise. They're trying to expand the role. It's like a really big fat guy putting on a small sweater, and they stretch the sweater out, and the sweater will never go back to its original size, right? That's what, what's that? I wasn't talking about you, Rick Tate. No. But the point is we file lawsuits under the Administrative Procedures Act because they're trying to circumvent the rule or the way that you go about changing administrative law. And they try to get around that and do it through executive fiat. And we usually win up and down on those types of cases. And we were able to roll them back on WOTUS.
It does change zoning, so let's say, for example, that you're zoned for a certain type of housing, and what this will do is it will actually take that housing and make it into public housing, and there's not a thing you can do about it. So that's what's scary.
I want to, and we're going to you next. 30 seconds. There was a thing passed in 2020 or 2021 under the NDAA. That was during the fog of COVID. Remember that? We were all locked in and handcuffed. Hey, Stuart. Good to see you. You've already been plugged by your man here. He already plugged you. Okay. Aaron already plugged you. The thing called the CTA, the Corporate Transparency Act. And here's what it did. It was passed during the COVID time. It was when Trump was still in the White House, okay? But it was passed, and it was buried in the National Defense Authorization Act. And what it does is it requires all small businesses with less than $5 million in receipts or less than 20 employees to file a paperwork with the IRS disclosing who all has ownership interest in your business. And it gives criminal penalties if you fail to do it. It goes into effect in January of 2025. I'm judging by the look on your face. A chill just went up your spine. Yeah, well, me too. I learned about this like 2 weeks ago. So I'm now to the question Aaron asked. I am talking with other AGs about, let's explore a way to roll that sucker back before it goes into effect, because I don't want IRS coming at. They just funded 80,000 IRS agents a couple years ago to come after small business people. It doesn't apply to Amazon, right, or Walmart or Target. It applies to the mom and pops. That's terrifying, Val. Terrifying. So that's something we're working on. You've been very patient. I'm so sorry.
I have time. That's okay.
I'm a
Thank you.
talker.
First of all, thank you for being here. My name is
a JMSC, but how the JMSC is elected and made up is of great importance to me, who has control over the JMSC. I think the executive branch, think of the JMSC as a funnel with a filter in it that filters off all the candidates and gets to determine who the legislature gets to vote on. And I think the executive branch should totally control that mechanism for fielding out or vetting out candidates. And then the General Assembly should have total, and constitutionally, the General Assembly is the only branch that can elect judges. And they should. Again, they are closer to you as representatives than I am, or the governor is. So I want you to be able to go to Representative Carter and chew on his ear if he doesn't vote for the judge you wanted, right? And I'm sure you would agree with that. Am I right? And Stuart Jones would agree with that, right? You want that personal touch with your legislator. But I think the executive branch of government should be an equal partner and at least be able to counteract that final vote by determining what candidates get voted on. And so that to me brings, they talk about in Star Wars, balance to the Force. It brings balance. And again, you want the government, the three branches of government, to be in constant tension with each other. It's like three people holding a rope that are tied in a knot in the middle. And we're all, if one person drops the rope, they go flying over. You want those three branches tugging on each other.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. And then one more quick question about capital punishment.
I'm
It's
for
my
it.
understanding that, it's
Lethal injection. Thank you. Lethal injection. 3 ways to do it. The chemicals that used for lethal injection you could not get. Okay, and well, it's still hard to get. We just now created another way to execute people with a firing squad, and and in Texas is able to just line them all up in a stadium to hit a button. Texas has their own. I was talking to a friend of mine at the Department of Corrections. They have their own mad scientists where they actually create their own chemicals. They don't have to go to outside pharmaceutical companies, and pharmaceutical companies don't want to they don't want the bad press, so they don't like working with the states. But we have alternatives. So thank you all, the legislature, for giving us that. So also the appeals process is very long for capital cases, and we defend the capital cases, meaning we defend the death penalty in those. But those can last years and like decades, like 15 years. So I saw a hand over here, and I see a hand in the very back, behind Little Bill.
Got time for about one more quick question.
I'll make my answer short. We'll try to get the 3 hands I saw.
Okay. Knock
I'll
them
do
out.
them real fast.
And I wanted to point out before I take the microphone, Heather is the local chairman of Moms for Liberty. So.
Oh, thank you for what you do. And by the way, y'all are not domestic terrorists. I don't care what the Justice Department says.
Okay, we'll start at the front and go towards the back.
I saw 3 hands. We're going to go as quickly as possible.
My name is Jeremy.
more money to defend a capital case. It might cost indigent defense money to defend someone who is not capable of funding their own attorney, which someone in death row probably would need. But at the end of the day is you pay for things. Do you want the death penalty in South Carolina, yes or no, is the question. Okay, if you want the death penalty, you have to make sure that you adhere to due process rights of the condemned and convicted. And you also have to make sure that we follow the Constitution, right? That costs money. That is the price for the death penalty. And so it's not a question of do we want to pay the money? The question is, do we want the death penalty? If you want the death penalty, it costs to do the death penalty. Pure and simple. Okay? It's like it costs money. You know, the three most expensive thing the government does, it incarcerates, it medicates, and it educates. Those are three funding things, and that's probably 80% of the budget right there, right? And so that's where the bulk of your tax dollars are going to. And if you want to keep doing those things, that's what costs money.
And I would, on the end of this, I spoke to him when he first got here. He came 30 minutes early.
Thank you so much for having me. God bless you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you. Here. Yeah, you go ahead and sing the ditty.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Counts.
I say, Eddie Howard has the microphone now. He's got something to say to you guys.
Look out now. No, I'm going to get pass that.
Yeah, I'll give it to him.
All right. Thank you guys all for coming out tonight. I got to say, anytime that we hear Star Wars and James Madison quoted in one night, it's a good night for me. You guys drive safe and hope to see you again next time. Thank y'all.